Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology, and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. Hello and welcome to SciTech Culture, the show where we discuss science, technology, and culture in its myriad of forms. I'm one of your hosts, Ben Warner, and I'm joined by my good friend, colleague, and fellow co-host, Steve Kern, to discuss which species runs the world today. How are you today, Steve?
I'm good, thanks, Ben. I'm not sure what species runs the world, but I guess we'll explore that a little bit further.
Yeah, absolutely. Just before we start, I was having a bit of a joke about this before with Steve. I started using this nice little Bose speaker to record Steve's audio for the feed. If you're wondering why there's always been a speaker here, it's so that it's sort of like a makeshift way of recording both of our audio into one track. Saves a hell of a lot of headaches later in post. But I just realised I've put the more attractive part of the speaker to the camera today. So it was I thought I like having every piece, every detail sort of looked after if we can manage it.
Nice touch, Ben. Nice touch.
But and not as a paid endorsement. I think the Bose speaker does actually pretty well. This one's actually pretty good. Alrighty. We're talking about which species really runs the world today, and this came up after I saw an article in The Age this week, essentially asking, what was it? Ants and termites might run the world more than you think. In 1987, Harvard entomologist Professor E.O. Wilson said that insects in general and ants and termites in particular were the little things that run the world. Was he right? And just in going through the article, the emphasis there was on how, because there are just so many of them, and in terms of mass, they're just huge. If you were to sort of put them all together and weigh it, they actually account for a fairly significant percentage of the biomass, say especially in tropical rainforests and things like that, and the way they interact with those forests, because obviously plants and trees and that is sort of, we need those around in order to sustain our lives. And if there's some sort of species that's having a fairly significant impact on those plants and trees, then it's going to affect us. So,
absolutely, yeah.
So they kind of had some ups and downs with it, but it really was that interaction with the plantation and that sort of thing. So what do you reckon about all that sort of thing, Steve?
Well, yes. I mean, I think after bacteria, ants are the next most populous species on the planet. And basically the whole biosphere, or the entire biosphere, everything you can see around you, is part of a giant chemical reaction, and effectively your ants and termites are catalysts for that. So they help in the breakdown. So, of course, things grow, things live, and things die. And the most important thing that we often overlook is the fact that in death you have to deconstruct whatever was there, which is done by bacteria usually and your ants, and turn it back into nutrients or back into the base chemicals that can be turned around and made back into living things. So, yeah, I mean, without them, you'd probably run out of the raw materials to actually keep on, sustaining life on the planet.
And isn't that a broader issue as well, that the ecosystem is very complicated in nature in this respect, because it's easy for us to go around and do our daily lives and not realize that there's so much going on to sustain this world that we're living in, and any effect on those things can have some fairly significant consequences.
Well, absolutely. As a human who likes to think he's the most dominant species on the planet, it is easy to forget that we're part of a chain. And I think that this is, whether it comes to climate change or anything, around the sustainability or the sciences of the environment, very often it's forgotten that we're just part of a process. We might have sentient minds, we might be able to come up with great technological advances and scientific discoveries, but we're still doing it within basically a chemical reaction. Just because you can't see the air around you doesn't mean it's not there. and that air is changing. Your presence in that air changes that air. That air, obviously nourishes us all with, the gases we need to live. Those gases are consumed by plants and all sorts of living creatures. And that's how, life works. And yes, we are dominant in terms of our impact on the planet. We're dominant in terms of, I guess, what we would term our intelligence. But as part of the chain, we're no more dominant than an ant or a termite or a bacteria.
Yeah, exactly. Just in this same Age article, they were also talking about the commercial potential for ants and termites as well.
Why didn't we think of this earlier, Ben? This is a good one.
Yeah, exactly. Just as an example, scientists at the CSIRO and Sydney University have found that when allowed to flourish, the insects can boost yields of wheat crops by up to 36%. A comprehensive study conducted on a farm in an arid region about 100 kilometres northeast of Geraldton in WA reveals how they work their magic. And basically that the insects are playing a role not unlike that of earthworms in this respect. And that's interesting as well, isn't it? If you're thinking of it in terms of there's commercial potential there, but if you're then going to translate that into some sort of industrial process, what are they going to grow these ants somewhere or whatnot to get the process up and running? I mean, it's encouraging, but you'd have to wonder how they would then turn that into a industrial practical application that would be larger in scale.
Well, that is an interesting question. I mean, there's, I guess, many ways you could do it, but I guess one thing that we're certainly a lot more further advanced than we were, say, 50 years ago, where we just spray a whole crop and, it would take out the pests, but it would also take out, probably a lot of the good populations in there as well. And I think this is one thing that people often overlook with genetically modified foods. If you genetically modify foods or crops so that they're a little bit more, tolerant to pests or, resistant to pests or whatever combination you put in there, you don't need to spray. That's the first thing. And the second thing is it allows other species to flourish in there. And this is the key, because it's about always, in crop protection at least, it's about getting the balance right between your species. And the problems you always have is when one species goes out of whack.
Yeah.
Because, they love the environment or, you spray too much and you knock out others. And it's no different, for instance, when we take antibiotics and knock out all our good bacteria in the gut. So I think what you're really looking at here is just rebalancing these populations. And I think from what I understood in the paper is it's more about the practice of agriculture and how you would create agricultural environments where the ants or termites could flourish to increase productivity. I don't know, though, if there's other uses for ants. Do we put them on a treadmill? Lots of ants on a treadmill and get them powering something? I don't know if that would work. They're very strong.
Oh, yeah, especially when you link them all together.
Yeah.
Just finally on that Age article too, they're just saying that ants and termites dig tunnels in the ground to make nests and forage. Being open at the surface of the tunnels provide a way into the soil, and it's a way to assess availability of water, checking the ground during rain, that sort of thing. And also from a nutrient perspective, by eating and defecating into the earth, termites break down complex molecules that plants otherwise could not use, and this increases the nutrients in the soil. All very important stuff.
Oh, look, absolutely. I mean, we all hate termites because if they get into our houses, it's not a good thing. But they're out there. Otherwise, when a tree fell over, a tree would be there forever. I mean, can you imagine? We've burned a lot of trees in our time. but prior to humans actually using wood, the forest would have just died under the weight of dead forest.
Yeah, that's right.
So, this is why these creatures are there. And this is the dominant roles they have within those ecosystems. We've exceeded probably the ecosystem as humans in a lot of ways, and we are dominant, but we ain't the be-all and end-all of an ecosystem.
Well, all it takes is for that system to get upset in some way, like you mentioned before, or sort of mentioned before, and then we're at the mercy of what happens then.
Well, yeah, and also just on this, we did explore this a while back, so I might repost the blog, Ben. But humans dominant maybe, but apparently in terms of population, rats and mice, because they love humans so much, are a little bit more dominant than us.
Exactly. Just before we move on to some final points, there was a funny article at crack.com, five animals that could take over the world if they wanted to, and this was quite amusing. They had an octopus that remembered someone that they didn't like, and apparently that this poor girl that the octopus didn't like would spit on her, and then apparently she went away for a while. She returned a year later, and the octopus still remembered her and spat on her. So
octopi are very intelligent creatures, very underrated apparently.
There you go. We've got some army ants there. They could cause some serious havoc. Cape buffalo they've got here, going on to our next page. Let's hope it doesn't take too long. But I think if they knew about their strength, that's where or played to their strengths. I mean, also you've got spiders in here as well, which is interesting.
Anyone who recently saw the video of the boxing kangaroos in that Brisbane suburb, I reckon kangaroos could take over if they wanted.
Exactly, and poisonous snakes as well.
Snakes on a plane. Snakes on a plane.
They made a movie about it already. All right, and just finally, there was another article in The Age, which we can tie in with this. Life on Earth may have flourished a billion years earlier than thought. More than 3 billion years ago, Earth was a hostile, volatile place. Its air oxygenless and its climate unpredictable, but life still thrived. According to a study published in the journal Nature, which analysed 52 ancient rock samples and found that organisms capable of pulling nitrogen from the atmosphere and converting it into a usable form first appeared around 3.2 billion years ago, about a billion years earlier than previous estimates. I guess that also highlights... the first thought that I thought was that it's with a changing sort of ecosystem and environment, just because we breathe in oxygen now and that's how we sort of survive here, doesn't mean that there isn't some other sort of variation of it where we might find it toxic, but other species would find it perfectly fine. Exactly.
And that's, once again, that shows the environment was very different 3 billion years ago on Earth. And the dominant creatures then, basically transpired through nitrogen. So it's interesting. It's very interesting that can change, and it's changed now. And the environment around us is very important. And back then, they were the dominant species.
Yeah, what was interesting, they were saying something that the nitrogen then was a little bit different. It was harder to process in the sense that, like, not compared to how it is today. I think it was the way it was binded in different types of compounds made it more difficult to sort of access. What also was interesting was that you had these early organisms that, I mean, they say crawled out of the ocean, but assuming they had limbs, but they would live on land in a single layer of cells. They'd coat the planet's rocks with a thin film of slime, and then they would quietly exhale small amounts of oxygen, which over time would eventually change things around again. And again, that's something that's hard to get your head around too, that these processes can take an incredibly long time to change things. And then, we can just take it for granted that things are just the way they are right now.
Look, absolutely. And there's an interesting sort of parallel to this when people talk about terraforming Mars, that this is precisely how you would do it. You would find something that would grow in the Martian atmosphere and, eventually it would change the environment. We know Mars probably had a wet, much warmer climate than it does today and a thicker atmosphere at the same time that this was happening on Earth. And today it doesn't. But, you could potentially find something that would grow in the Martian conditions and who knows what you'd get. Maybe just a grey ooze that would devour astronauts. That would make a great film.
Oh, absolutely.
Or maybe you would actually be able to get something like a moss or a lichen And
And what I guess what's interesting about all of that too is that scientists looking to undertake, and engineers, I guess, would undertake to look to the past and history and sort of an almost archaeological sort of scientific history of the world to then inform how they would go about undertaking some fairly complex projects in outer space at a later point. That's quite fascinating as well.
Yeah, well, that's precisely what it's about. You see, and the whole battle in space, which is obviously uninhabitable for humans, is how do you create an ecosystem that doesn't require a constant amount of power, that you can recycle constantly, just like we do on Earth, and maintain people in a living state. It's a big challenge, and that's actually the way they approach those things. And probably anyone who's familiar with biosphere in the 90s didn't quite work out the way it should have. But that's the idea. They try to create a biosphere where you have this chain, where you have enough microbes, where you have enough insects and enough people and enough chemical action in there, or enough energy in that biosphere to keep the process turning. It's fascinating.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. So thanks again for the chat.
Anytime. We are most dominant though, Ben. I'm not going to let ants take over, that's for sure.
Oh, well, who would do SciTech culture then,
Someone with 6 arms?
Yeah. Oh, that'll be a whole different show then. All right. So don't forget our website, scitechculture.com. That's got the links to all of our content, social media feeds and whatnot. So check it out. Hopefully you'll like a lot of the content on there, including this video that you've just watched. You can interact with us as well directly through Twitter, Facebook and Google+. We've got some photography on our Instagram and Flickr feeds, and we've got blogs and all sorts of things that are there. So that's all there for you to check out. And if you think anyone's interested in these discussions that Steve and I have on a semi-regular basis, then feel free to send them to our website. We'd greatly appreciate that. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.